We're here to explore the role of illustration and artist-drawn content in the creative strategies of organizations who are changing our world. The Drawing Board is your source for the cutting edge of illustrated brand content. Welcome to The Drawing Board, hosted by me, Andrew Herkert. You can call me AJ. Today is Monday, July 11th, and we have a great show lined up for you today. This week's guest is leading our first ever e-learning expert session. Dr. Young Mao is an accomplished thought leader and practitioner with extensive experience in the field as a learning professional. He is a Ph.D., instructional design expert, and classroom educator. You may even know him from Squigl, where he is Vice President of Customer Success. In today's discussion, Young and I will focus on a few points. Here are 3 key takeaways you can expect to learn about in today's session. 1. The painful problems solved by users of illustrated content. 2. Because Young is a practitioner and highly credentialed expert in the field, we help dissect this problem meticulously. Number 3, how this problem dictates the very specialized role of artist-drawn content in today's media mix. You will emerge with a clear understanding of the need for illustration, storytelling, and artist-drawn brand content in today's media landscape. You'll understand how global experts run the largest companies, agencies, and institutions in the world using illustration in storytelling. And if you're anything like me, you'll probably find this perspective today invaluable for our study. Let's jump on in.
If you're thinking about them, if you don't capture their attention within the first few seconds of your presentation, unless they have to listen to what you have to say, they're not going to. Right? And so what are these learning professionals doing right now to capture attention? We're using what's already out there. So PowerPoint is what's already out there. Talking heads, that's the second one, right?
Like the Brady Bunch, like you and I right now.
Absolutely.
Hollywood Squares.
Yep. And so we have this thing where when a method is being overused, it gets uninteresting, right? And so it doesn't capture the attention of the audience as much as when it first started, when the method is new. So now the learning professionals are searching for other ways to capture the attention and to engage the users in meaningful ways, right? Not just tricking them to listen to you, but really honestly capture the attention. Storytelling has been a big thing, has always been a big thing, but they're bringing it back in terms of ways to engage because we are natural storytellers, right?
That's right.
You can sit and listen to someone tells their stories, but how do you tell the stories in a way that really engages? Right, you can sit, and unless you're a really good storyteller and you sit down and you change your tone of voice and then you create that mood.
And that doesn't scale.
No.
Being, sitting around the campfire is one thing. We've all been there. It's intimate.
Right.
As soon as you have 10 people or 12 people or whatever that student to faculty ratio ideally is, once you pass that threshold, you can't scale around the campfire.
Absolutely.
And so I think you might be onto something there as I think about the moment that's replicated in, let's just say, illustrated brand content, such as a whiteboard video. Well, as I'm teaching my son to read right now, all he sees on the page is images, words, and the human hand. In fact, the hand of his flesh and blood, who's teaching him maybe one of the most vital skills that he'll learn in his life. And so there's something to creating that moment, Young, that you're getting at here. The story itself, it's more than curriculum. It's more than a learning objective, I think. It has to do more with like modality or context.
Mm-hmm. Reflecting on what you also said in terms of teaching your son to read. So I'm reading to my kid. He's only 5 months old, right?
Yeah.
Whatever patient that he can give me. But the thing that captures him, not, he hear my voices. So that captures his attention. But what we're sharing together within that moment is that, you said, that picture, right? So in a world that is rapidly moving, and we have 1,000,001 things coming our way, to try to create that moment, we have to anchor it in something. And bring it back. A picture is worth 1,000 words. A picture could also recapture the memory.
You know what I can tell you academically and clinically speaking? 1,000 words is light for an image. An image could speak 1,000 words, but that could be minimum wage. You could write 10,000 words about an image.
Because I'm an instructional designer, I advocate for ways to create learning more accessible to students. And leveraging technology, leveraging the internet is one way to do that, right? To make learning more accessible to students.
Yes.
And so some of my colleagues
and with great success, I would add, by the way, Jan.
You're very kind.
Truly a technology evangelist, and it's just amazing to watch you work. So continue.
You're very kind, sir. So one of my colleagues, and a few of my colleagues actually, in addition to some of the faculty, push back and says, "Young, we can't have meaningful conversation with somebody who we're not in the same room with."
Wow.
Right. So we have this space. It's like, I can't really connect with you if I don't sit across from you. And so I push back, not like, not angrily, but gently question whether space is the only thing that allowed us to create connection. And I says, how about we switch our mind, we reframe this instead of, I'm going to be in the same space with you, which helps, but I'm going to share the same experience with you.
There you go.
Talking about the same experience. Share the same space with 399 other people and make no friends.
Good luck.
Yeah, right? So space it helps, but doesn't mean that it will automatically instantly connect you with another person. Right? You and I, we lived like 100, 200 miles away apart. I don't know what the distance is. You and I can make a connection right here, right now.
Around 320, I think.
Right?
But it doesn't stop us. Exactly.
No, because we talk about shared experiences.
Yes.
Right. So a combination. If we are in the same shared space plus shared experiences, that strengthens that connection that we can build together. But if we have shared experiences, we can also strengthen that connection.
Love it. Did you have this perspective in early years as an instructional designer?
I have this perspective actually at that psychology class that I sat on with 400 people, and I make no friends.
Wow.
Because I come to realize that being in a room full of people does not mean you make friends. Right? But being even sitting here and talking like a pen pal, writing to somebody from a different country, sharing your experiences, and they're like, yeah, I have the same thing too. That's the connection. Yeah. That's experience. That's shared experience that we're talking about there.
The way that I've seen you operate is you use the technology as the connection point, but it's not for the sake of the technology.
Piggyback on what you say is that reality is not, reality is what we agreed upon, right? So people have to accept that, multiple people have to accept that a certain thing happens for that reality to be accepted by the population. And if we're looking at communication, the communication takes a few forms, right? It takes spoken language, it takes the nonverbal language, and it takes illustrations, right?
Yes.
In our society, there are certain images that everybody agrees that when you see it, it means this.
Yes.
And that's I think that's what sometimes it's being battled in for the lack of a better word, because there are things that people take for granted, that we take for granted, that when you see it, it means something, but now people is like, well, no, it doesn't mean like anymore.
Right.
Right. And then we all try and define what things are meaning now, because the foundation of what we used to know are being shook up so much that we don't recognize it. So to communicate effectively, we have to first agree on what different elements means.
Yes.
Right. So if I tell you
The standards
that
need to be developed.
exactly,
Vocabulary. Yeah.
exactly. So the question being is that how could we create those standards that are meaningful and that are inclusive?
And it doesn't start with a face on a screen.
No.
As soon as we have somebody depicted physically, literally, talent, lights, camera, action, the cognitive biases begin.
You know, on the background we have right now, we have True Scribe, and we have a character of a gentleman carrying a backpack.
Kind of looks like me.
Yeah, exactly. But I can say, you know, that could be me with a couple of, you know, adjusted hairdo, right?
Get your beard grown out.
Exactly, get my beard going on, right? Or one of our team members could say, that could be me.
Yes.
But I can put myself in that character.
Yes.
Right. We create a shell, we create a foundation that everybody could be in without having to define so much detail that now it's not I could be part of that, or that could be me. That's definitely the other person.
And hearing you say that, you could even look at that image that's right behind me and say to yourself, wow, they really nailed the St. Paul skyline there.
Right. Right.
Or the Madison, Wisconsin skyline.
Right.
Or DC. There's something innately human about this medium. That's really insightful. Qualitatively speaking, what type of feedback are you hearing when you're deploying this modality, these illustrations?
One other thing that my students, I gave my student an assignment to Squigl.
Yeah.
One thing that I hear back from my student is, this is great. I can communicate my thoughts better. They can do it better because they can use images that they can relate to. And then that images, when it was shared with the classmate's like, yes, I can see that situation too. But that images means slightly different from where I'm looking at. But it communicates a similar message. Right.
Again, if you're drawing the Basilica in St. Paul or the Capitol Dome of Madison, Wisconsin.
Yes. Yes. So, and one other thing that's really fascinating to me when I use Squigl is this idea of adding emotional awareness to the communication. Now, so English is my third language, and I learned how to read and write at age 9. Okay, so before then, I don't know how to read or write in English. Ashlands, that's where I learned how to read. Right. The same time I learned how to speak.
Okay.
And then write. But the thing is that it takes me years, I would say 15 years of learning the language to be able to articulate my emotion. Right.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So articulating emotion is more complicated than articulating an idea.
Yes.
You know, is I am eating food is different from, you know, I'm enjoying this delicious meal that has so much aroma that take me back to whatever time, that give me a sense of safety and I'm loved.
Yes.
It takes a lot. The thing is that you can capture all that in a facial expression of an illustration. So my student says, I am emotionally deficit. This helps me communicate my emotion to
Wow.
others.
Switch student for adult learner in any corporate context, and we hear the same thing, and we've heard it for 12 years now, Young.
Yeah,
Thousands of these videos delivered, you know, and it doesn't matter what tool you're using. Frankly speaking, of course we have biases, but at the same point, if I'm just sitting next to somebody and I pick up a napkin and jot down my idea real quick using visuals, you just nailed it. I'm going to tell you so much more than I would with words.
I had a conversation with my students once about culture and language, and then we used the metaphor of culture and language as being individual crayons, right?
Okay.
And we says that each culture could represent a crayon, and within those there are shades of, say, red. There are shades of red, right? But when you go to Latin, or when you go to a completely different part of the world, it's another crayon, because they will see the world slightly different.
So you're using different colors of expression.
Yeah, and then so what happened is, if we keep our mind open to all these languages and all this culture, we collected ourselves a set of crayons that allowed us to paint the world in a more beautiful way.
Wow.
Right? In a more realistic, more rich way, instead of just shades of one thing, right? Even shades of red or shades of purple, beautiful as it may be, still just that one essence.
Yes.
But if you add other elements to it, then we can see the world not just from one perspective, from an end of one, but an end of many. And then from there, we can appreciate not just how we experience life, but how others experience life. And we can better connect.
Right, because ultimately, right, because transmitting ideas becomes the actual objective there.
Right.
As you said, adding tools to the toolbox to transmit ideas becomes perhaps that competitive advantage that we're chasing.
Yeah, yeah.
If I have an arsenal of, just hardware, mechanical, just say wrenches and screwdrivers and drills and, you name it, right? A bunch of just equipment, but I don't have maybe the right drill bit. When I don't have that right drill bit, I can't finish the job. I can't complete the task. Being physically bound here to a certain outcome means that you need to use certain tools. So to your point, that there may be a necessity for using illustrated content or illustrated brand content. Dare I even say artist-drawn content? Again, it doesn't need to be an MFA in the studio creating something that's bespoke or high touch. It could very well be you and I sitting together at a table and I sketch a quick workflow out, and you're able to follow that so much faster than just by speaking it.
Well, I teach human services, and the animation tool is great within that, because within human services, we teach our students to find ways to build rapport and to connect, right? In addition to that, some of my students, a good percentage, I don't know the exact number, but I want to say maybe between 40 and even 50%. Sometimes my students are from another country. Their homeland is somewhere else, and they come over here to study, or they come over here to make the U.S. their new home.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So you're seeing an entire cross section, is my point,
Right.
there, of global culture, and that's what I wanted to make sure we hit on.
Yeah. And so the images, going back to illustration, there are things that pictures can cut across, no matter where you are. All languages,
like the icon
different
for
culture.
the airport. You notice how every single airport you go to has the same plane taking off and or landing as the marker on the highway everywhere. It's the same.
Exactly. And I wonder how often do IKEA changes their illustration, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
IKEA
need to get somebody. We need to get somebody from IKEA on the
exactly.
phone here. I don't know who to call, but we'll put a line out. I think that's a great thought.
The thing is that illustration can cut across those,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And my students who are from Ethiopia, and my students who are from Mexico, and my students who are from Russia could come together and actually select the same images to say the same thing.
Wow. Like the airport.
Exactly, like the airport. And imagine the collaboration. If we can ground a person in one common truth, we can use it as a base point to build on that collaboration.
But the word is truth, and you just nailed it. It's not about yet another misinformation platform, as we were just talking about. It's not about artistry for the sake of artistry. If you want that, go to the art museum. You can walk around and look at Picasso's take, or Van Gogh, or Rembrandt, or name it, right? Fine art is everywhere. It's about effectiveness. As you say, it cut through the noise.
What is the goal? The goal is to create learning. Technology is a means to that learning, to that goal.
Yeah.
That's why we use tools meaningfully, and we use tools in combination, right? Can't build a house with a hammer, right? You can't.
You need one halfway through, though.
Yeah, you do. You need a hammer. Absolutely, you do. But not just a hammer. Just like you can't create learning with Zoom.
But you need
doesn't work. You need Zoom,
but you need more. You need
more than Zoom. Yeah.
You need contractors, framing, electrical, all these systems, and they're interconnected in the learning process.
Exactly. And learning shouldn't be teaching should not be done alone. I've always advocated for co-teaching with my colleagues, and that's when my students get the most benefit from both of our experiences. Right. So you and I would sit down in a classroom and we talk about our learning as our travel journey. You have a different experience than I do. And between the both of us, we can paint a better picture for our learners than if I were just to talk about my experience.
That's right. And again, without the illustrated brand content of some kind, if it's icons, if it's symbols, if it's glyphs, or if it's just what you want to call drawings, we have a really difficult time with that. That might be the problem, that we started this conversation trying to investigate. Perhaps it's that lacking the right tool to get the right job done at the right time.
Right.
Is thinking about the Squigl platform today and thinking about the Squigl platform in 6 months. I want you to tell people who are listening what to expect, what changes are coming, what's on the roadmap.
There will be a transformation where it's easier to edit your video, for example. It's the process of going from text to animation would be a lot more smoother. Now it is smooth, but it's more straightforward.
Okay.
Right. And then adding to the glyph library, increasing maybe collaboration. I feel like something that is important to many of our users. Make that more robust, and make the workflow more efficient in that sense. Reduce the amount of time.
So what does it boil down to in, again, 3 or 6 months from now, when some of these changes have been enacted? What can the user achieve?
One other thing that with Squigl that I'm constantly pushing for and working on is, look, you need to reduce the learning curve. We're talking about having a lot of tools that we need to use to create something that we want to create, like learning.
Yes.
If we want our users, our learning professionals, we have to make sure that the learning curve are as low as possible, because folks don't have time, again, but they have the willing and the yearning to do
And
this
the problem
work.
and the problem to solve, as we've just
Yeah.
articulated. This is a real problem in communication and content, and so it's an important one for people to prioritize.
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
seen that time and again, year
Yeah.
after year, quarter after quarter. It's incredible the amount of projects that come our way that are just remarkable from a context perspective. Again, this problem we're solving is transformation of major industry. It's ideas and philosophies and best practices and training curriculum that changes entire states of the economy and market. It's incredible.
Yeah. If you move the population, the next thing you know, you have a whole completely different worldview.
That's right.
So this is not just I'm teaching a concept to a student, is that I'm trying to shape a future that is more in my sense, my view of what the future will be, what kind of world I want my son to grow up in.
Right.
More kind, more accepting, more understanding, more patient.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
To do that, I need to figure a way to convince or articulate my thoughts in a way to have a group of people that says this is a good idea to go for it. This is a worthwhile goal to pursue together. And to do that, I have to communicate with them in a way that I understand.
And oftentimes in more than one way, in an email, in a meeting, in an animation, and then tell them again in person when you see them next.
Exactly.
I'm going to call you about this or whatever.
Yeah. So I want my tools to work. My tools need to work. It needs to be as robust. It needs to be agile with me. And it needs to allow me to put in my creativity in there. Right. So that's what I envision Squigl to be.
So we've just learned exactly why illustration is here to stay, and it's only getting more prolific as business communications develop. We can seriously look forward to the advent of additional dimensions, capabilities, applications, and use cases for illustrated, hand-drawn brand content. That's all the time we've got for today. We hope you've learned as much as we have. Go ahead and show Dr. Mao your appreciation by sharing this podcast with someone who may find it valuable. We'll see you next week. For now, back to the drawing board.